Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 34, Episode 4. Coming up on the show, we've got the Cult of the Wyrm, the Whispers of the Stones, and the Disc of the Dragon. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
Oh, the Disc of the Dragon. Is that a holiday?
Yeah, it's one of Ted Holliday's books.
Yeah.
I think the Disc of the Dragon is his second after, what was the first one? The Orm?
That's right.
The Orm of the Loch.
Yes, it was supposed to be a worm, wasn't it?
Well, Ted Holliday, if you don't know, he was the infamous Loch Ness Monster researcher who he wrote his first book in, what was it, 1968.
Yep.
He was convinced that the Loch Ness Monster was a giant mollusk.
That's it. Right.
The Orm. He called it the Orm. And it was like a boneless, formless creature that could change shapes and kind of go through the loch.
I recall correctly, didn't he have a series of weird encounters with other paranormal phenomena that kind of dismissed that idea?
Yeah, well, the Ted Holliday story, as we know, culminates in Men in Black encounters, and he ended up investigating UFO sightings and ET sightings, and that's when it all fell apart for Ted.
Did you manage to hunt down a copy of that book, did you?
Well, the whole thing today started when I saw this meme again on my timeline. I love this meme.
Me too, yeah.
It's got the Soy Jack character on the right, and on the left side are all these images of
like a griffin, and then a lizard, and then the traditional Tyrannosaurus, and then a velociraptor, and then as what we know now is that dinosaurs were kind of flightless birds, or beginning to become birds, or feathered.
So it's showing the mainstream, I guess, accepted conventional understanding of how a dinosaur would appear. And so the Middle Ages one is the first one, Middle Ages BS, and it ends up being the same as what we understand dinosaurs probably look like today, which is, winged, feathered, and the Soy Jack is just the icing on the cake that he hates. He's smug about the Middle Ages BS because how dumb were they, our ancestors? How stupid were our ancestors to believe that nonsense? And yet today we come full circle. The reason I like this meme is because it shows how the established knowledge, it shifts, and the experts never have everything exactly right. Like even the experts, the all-knowing experts, get things wrong.
Oh, and also the continuing arrogance of like a society thinking that they're at the top, like they're at the top of their understanding. Like we look back upon people even, decades ago and say, oh, how foolish were they to think that because we have all the information. But precisely the same thing will happen with future generations.
Well, for me, it also indicates that our ancestors understood the natural world, our place in it, and the subtle layers of reality much better and in a much fuller sense than we do today. We have a very surface, materialist understanding of things. And so this meme got me thinking about that, which is why I went into like a dragon/dinosaur direction to see what I could dig up.
Yep.
I ended up finding some interesting stuff and going into Holliday's more obscure books because, of course, the most famous one, which we always reference, is the Goblin universe. Yes. And we've covered this a bunch of times on the show. This was his last book before he died, and his death, of course, was tragic and strange, and we'll cover it again on this episode. But I ended up finding, the Serpents of the Sky, Dragons of the Earth, which was a republished issue of The Dragon and the Disc.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Because I've sought like a certain, not paragraphs, chapters of that book in the past. I've been able to track that down, but I've never been able to get a copy of it.
Yeah, we've been looking for The Dragon and the Disc
for a long time.
For years and years and years.
Yeah.
It's hard to get. I never realized that, this one's a reissue, which is pretty easy to find.
I will note, I say it's hard to get, but it's just like now it's available in hardback.
Yeah, I think they reissued it.
Oh, right, okay.
It's even easier now. So I went into that, and I'm going to go into some of the, not cutting-edge research, but just some of the understandings about the idea of these creatures. And we're going to go from the conventional understanding that it's nonsense, impossible, to ultimately where Ted Holliday ended up, which is that it's beyond materialism.
Yeah, of course.
It goes into something
ends up.
occult and supernatural. The Men in Black appear, UFOs are going to be on the scene, and just bizarre high strangeness. What did you end up uncovering?
Well, I wanted to continue a little bit what we were talking about on the Last Plus show, where we dived into this concept of like a different kind of psychometry, how traditionally psychometry can be used to grab hold of an object and obtain information about a person and get or capture images of the past, of events that have taken place. But then I told this story of where a a study was conducted or an experiment was conducted with psychometry where they had basically got a hall, put in 150 so chairs, and then just earmarked 6 of these chairs, and then got readers to read that chair before a bunch of random people came in. So that none of the readers knew who was going to sit in that chair, and yet they were able to pull out details of the future of that person sitting in that specific chair.
That was bizarre.
It's really bizarre. And it's just like a different kind of psychometry because it was looking into the future. And it was like not a cherished object, which is normally what psychometry is. Like it tends to be that it's an object that someone's hung onto, a treasured piece of jewelry, an heirloom.
Like I said on that show, you think of psychometry, you always think of reading the past.
Correct.
Looking into the past of the object rather than the future.
Not into the future. So this grabbed my attention. So I dug a little bit deeper and started looking into this whole idea of perceiving the future, utilizing these methodologies that are a little bit more unconventional. So we're going to dive into a little bit of the work of T.C. Lethbridge. Of course, we know him from his dowsing work, but he's had a collection of experiences that kind of led him down the path of it's not simply in the mind. There is an external agency that's associated with all of this strange phenomena. But it came full circle, actually, because we were talking about D. Scott Rogo and some criticism and fair criticism that D. Scott Rogo believed, who was, by the way, the noted researcher for telephone calls from the dead. That's one of his greatest works, but did a huge amount of work. But all of it, most of it.
Scott, everything is PK Rogo.
Everything is generated by the mind. It's like an external manifestation, a PK, a psychokinetic manifestation of the mind. And then we kind of went into this article that was debunking that. But it just so happens that Lethbridge was along the same path for quite a while, that there was some, not necessarily psychokinetic, but it certainly was connected to the mind as opposed to being an external agency. But he himself had this transformative experience, which we'll go into later on. And then if we've got time, I want to continue with a collection of stories of people who have had near death or transformative experiences, but like traumatic transformative experiences that have allowed them to be able to peek behind the veil, allowing them to see reality in a way that we necessarily don't.
Okay.
So we'll go into that later in the show.
Intrigued. So let's start and talk about some monsters. So as I said, I love this meme. I love the whole reference to medieval mythological creatures. And then I was over at theanomalous.com today and I saw that one of their very first links was to this story from the Scotsman.
Right.
Loch Ness Monster, Nessie spotters not swayed by postcard depictions, say Scott University. What is this about?
What does that even mean?
So that image of the Loch Ness Monster that you all know from the pop culture. It's like
the classic 1930s image you described.
Yeah, we all know this classic image, and this is much earlier than the 1930s, because even going back through folklore and old postcards and symbols and heralds.
I haven't seen it. I thought this was referencing something else. Like this is allegedly a true image.
I'm just showing you. No, I'm just showing you examples of why it's depicted like this.
I see. Yes.
So I'm putting on the screen these images of the humps.
Straight away, I'm like, that's fake.
yeah. These are just images of the humps, and so. This new research has come out from, Dr. Charles Paxton. He's from the University of St Andrews, and Adrian Shine from the Loch Ness Centre.
In Scotland.
Yeah, they've been exploring and found that only 1.5% of those who claim to have seen Nessie report those humps or hoops. So the reason this is newsworthy is the findings, they kind of contradict these earlier conclusions about people that see strange things. This obviously plays into what we cover on the show because there is research that suggests that eyewitnesses see things based on what they experience from pop culture. It's all colored by pop culture. That's one of the arguments that the mind creates these sightings. They're implying that everything's confabulated.
But I don't think that applies because, if you look into the research of people like Richard Freeman or Jonathan Downes, actually Jonathan Downes is a great example, they're not seeing humps. They're seeing very long structures that are just below the surface of the water, which is agitating the water, but you're not getting that classic image.
Well, the previous findings showed that portrayals of witnesses are usually influenced by popular portrayals of mythical creatures they see in the media, showing more people than previously thought report what they experience. So that's the new data. So Dr. Paxton from the university, they discovered that 25 and 32% of the postcards they looked at in their study, because that's what they used, postcards, showed these humps. But only 1.5% of the people that claim to have seen the creature in the loch report those details.
Yeah, but that's completely normal. That's like a ghost appearing like a sheet. You know, it's like you take an experience that like people describe and it becomes becomes culturalized, right? It becomes caught up in just like people report. So just because there's postcards showing humps, that doesn't mean that's what people are seeing. It's just the trope that's kind of come out of the experience.
Yeah, it's the trope. And if you examine people's actual descriptions of what they're seeing, it's not matching popular media. It's not matching, I guess, the archetype that you see in the media.
The expected sighting.
So, you know, I thought that was a good point, and this kept me going on this trend. And the next link from the Anomalist was to this Substack. It's called Henry's Substack. It's from Henry Bauer. And he writes a lot about these issues in science where modern science often gets things wrong. It obviously becomes like a religion to some scientists, and you don't want to upset the status quo.
It becomes a dogma.
So on and so forth. Yes, it's dogma. And they link to this article where he's writing about Loch Ness. And he just starts going off on Loch Ness. It's called Loch Ness, Well-Known Misinformation, Little-Known Truths. And he says during the 1930s, the global mass media decided that the Loch Ness Monster existed only as a persistent hoax. And that view entered also into such authoritative sources as encyclopedias, while genuinely scientific publications had nothing to say about it. He says this has hardly changed at all. Scientifically credentialed writers and pundits have not kept themselves up to date with the evidence. It's a very short article.
But what do you mean? Is he having a go at the people that believe in the Loch Ness Monster, or is he having a go in the fact that scientists haven't attempted to debunk it enough?
No, he's having a go at this book released last year by some random chick, like some random woman. It's a really short article, and he's just like, this woman, Rebecca Siegel, should be ashamed, and the publishers should be ashamed about this book.
Are you sure it was only released last year? That book looks very familiar.
They all look the same, these Loch Ness.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Loch Ness uncovered media misinformation and the greatest monster hoax of all time. So obviously her conclusion is that there's nothing to it. And I was like, why does this guy care? Why is he so into the whole Loch Ness situation? I realized he wrote a book about it in 1986 called The Enigma of Loch Ness. And he also published a academic paper on the Loch Ness Monster, the case for the Loch Ness Monster, the scientific evidence. This appeared back in 2002 in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. You know the one.
Yeah, of course.
And so I downloaded this and had a look because the guy was really worked up. He has this Substack about all these, very serious issues with science. And he's at Virginia Tech. I'm not sure what his credentials are. And then he's just got this article, like getting really angry at this woman that probably done some cursory research on Loch Ness and concluded that it's all nonsense. Like, why does he care?
Look at the cover. It's enough to make you go, well, I'm not even going to bother reading that.
Well, I ended up going into his paper and he starts talking about the evidence because he's convinced that we've had enough evidence since like the 1970s to conclude the Loch Ness Monster is real. It's 100% there. It's undeniable. And we've got everything on record that we need to say so.
That's a pretty bold claim.
Well, I thought, how can he make this claim? And he said one of the strongest pieces of evidence is the Dinsdale film. So in 1960, Tim Dinsdale filmed a Nessie moving at or near the surface of the water using a 16mm Bolex and telephoto lens at a range of about a mile. I'll put it up on the screen here. So here's some of the stills.
This is similar to what, was it Jonathan Downes as well, was describing? Remember how, was it Loch Ness? I'm not sure if it was Loch Ness, but it was very similar. It's like it was just below the surface of the water, but you can see a long structure and kind of a head cutting through the water. Very similar. Well, but no humps.
I don't know if there's no humps in this one. But the video's on YouTube, so let's take a look. Let's watch it. There's no audio, but we'll just slap it on.
So was it taken at night, obviously?
No, it's just like it's an old crappy camera and it's probably overcast. Like Scotland's probably mostly overcast. And so you can see this just head bobbing around in the water. It starts to move around. It's leaving quite a large wake behind it.
Yes.
And so some of the skepticism behind this has been that, well, it's a boat or, that's basically it. That's all that people can come up with is that it's a boat. Now, Bauer spends a lot of time explaining exactly why it's not a boat. he seems 100% convinced that this is the best footage we had. So I wanted to show you that. That's
definitely not the best footage.
That's the Dinsdale film. And what's interesting is if you look at this on YouTube, there's a comment, one of the top comments, and I'll link to the film in the show notes. It's from Midnight Black in Victoria from 11 years ago. And they said that the most interesting thing about the Dinsdale film isn't the video itself, but rather that after he filmed this, he got Nessie fever, giving up an extraordinary aeronautics career to spend the next 27 years of his life hunting this animal. If what he saw was that profound, and the guy said, look, I've seen where this is, and he wouldn't say it was a plesiosaur, but damn close. If what he saw was that profound to change his life like that, it must have had truth to it. The man was a well-adjusted intellectual by all accounts and not some random nutcase. It's something I think is fascinating.
This is something as well that these sorts of videos never portray. It's like when someone has an experience, us sitting here watching that video, it doesn't have the same, there's like an immaterial feeling.
Removed. You're totally removed from it.
You're totally removed from it. And for someone having that experience, what I've noticed with paranormal phenomena is it's like it generates a connection to the eyewitness. There's something more there. There's like an emotional, supernatural, telepathic, if you will, link with people. That's what's driving them to research something for so many decades.
Well, think about what this commenter said happened to the guy. He became obsessed. It took over his life. He gave up everything in the pursuit of this creature. And that speaks to where we're going to end up on this episode and to the real question of what's behind these things. What is their purpose? Are they just flesh and blood creatures, or is there something more to them? So that's a huge clue.
Well, they're both.
But going back to Henry Bauer's report, he says the next best evidence is sonar. And he talks about these sonar echoes that have been established and caught since the 1950s. They had 1968 engineers from Birmingham University tested a new digital sonar, detecting large objects coming from the bottom. Again, this was done in 1969, a big object moving parallel to the sonar-equipped boat. So this has happened again and again. During 1980, several dozen large echoes were obtained over the deep water of Loch Ness from the Morar project. And I won't go through all of them, but he's convinced these sonar results are really incredible because, of these observations, there's nothing else it could really be. Because sonar gives you a sense of the speed and the size these things are moving, which you don't get from photography. But what's more intriguing is when these sonar results have been paired with underwater photography. And so one of the most famous ones is from August of 1972. The AAS obtained strong echoes from what appeared to be two discrete objects. And the traces on the sonar chart, they showed fish. So they showed what looked like salmon.
So it can give you a size reference as well, the scale.
But these fish were obviously moving away from something much, much larger, like a large predator. They were fleeing. Now, at the same time that this sonar caught this giant object pursuing these fish, the underwater strobe light was going on and they were taking underwater photography. Now, what they uncovered were these famous images. And so this looks like a giant fin. Like the developed film showed faint outlines of something in the water, clearly on two of them the outlines of a flipper or a fin or a paddle. Now, the axis of the flipper changes. Here's the next image. So you can see it.
It does too.
You can see it moving. So it's not like a rock or anything. And since the sonar gave an accurate measure of how distant the objects were, it was possible to convert the dimensions in the photo into the actual size of the object.
Which was?
So the length of this flipper is 8 feet.
8 feet?
8 feet in length. It's about 4 feet across.
So that would, make that like almost 32 feet long?
That's a huge, whatever it is absolutely massive. And so, yeah, that's one of the incredible images that come with this sonar data. Now, Bauer points out that this was attacked. It's been attacked over the years, obviously, by skeptics, saying that these are edited on a computer. And so all these details have been added in. Now, what's intriguing is that these photos were enhanced on a computer.
Sure.
And in fact, it was done at...
like Kodak Labs or something?
No, it was done at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Really?
Yeah. And there's a quote from the guy that did it, the JPL Labs, who said, yeah, there's clearly some weird anomaly that looked like a flipper in the images. He didn't know where they were from. He was just doing the enhancement. But all they're doing is enhancing the contrast.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing. It's like what they
It's
did.
not adding anything to it.
What they did back then in the 70s, you could do on your phone today in 2 seconds. You're just like brightening it up and changing the contrast. And then, of course, Bauer gets to the eyewitnesses, and the eyewitnesses are eerily consistent, through hundreds of years of sightings. He goes through the long protrusion described as a long neck. Sometimes there's a long tail. When necks are reported, rarely is there a clearly defined head noted. The color is almost always dark gray or brown or black. The texture of the surface is never described as fish-like or like scaly, but rather as rough or knobby or warty, almost reminiscent of an elephant's hide. Quite often the creatures are described as submerging by sinking vertically, so they just go down like a submarine.
So this suggests to me that this is a plesiosaur style of creature, which would be consistent with what people are seeing, and that they're not seeing multiple serpentine-like humps in the water. They're seeing the head of the beast just sitting above the water while the rest of the body floats underneath.
Well, that's a good point to bring up because I wanted to show you these next images from 1975. So these didn't have simultaneous sonar, so it's not as strong a piece of evidence.
But the flipper is a dead giveaway.
This one...
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with this image.
You'll know this one. This is from 1975, again from the AAS. One of the photos appears to show a head, and another one, the silhouette of a body with a long neck. So this is the silhouette. And yeah, it kind of looks like
plesiosaur.
A plesiosaur. And this is the photo of the head.
I haven't seen this one before.
Now,
where is the head?
This is from a different photo, but it's in exactly the same location. So they're arguing this is the head of this creature. And so there was there's two projections on top of the head. And
towards the top left there?
Yeah, so
in the center?
This is a render from Sir Peter Scott based on this image. I'll just put this on the screen there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it almost looks like a weird gargoyle with these two protuberances on its head, which is odd because...
2 or 3?
Those two, well, I'm not sure that there is a third one there, but it's a lot smaller. But those two protuberances comes up all the time in the eyewitness reports. People say there's horns, or they had 2 weird knobs on their head, or there was something sticking out from its head. This comes up all the time. He then talks about the other locales that these have been seen. So it's not just Scotland, obviously. There's a ton all over the world, Canada, Ireland, the United States.
Well, Australia as well. There was some outlandish report of someone stumbling across, where was it? Was it a lake system in Sydney? But it was from maybe the very late 1800s. Someone claimed that they stumbled across essentially a plesiosaur-like creature that was sunbathing on the riverbank, and then it took off. Like Australia. Like that sounds like it's impossible.
So Bauer's idea is that this is some kind of sort of deep water creature. And he claims that this would be similar to something like the coelacanth, which is that weird fish.
Is coelacanth?
I don't know how to pronounce it.
I think it's coelacanth, but I could be wrong.
Coelacanth? That actually sounds better. So this one, I'll put on the screen here. They didn't believe this existed until a second specimen was found in 1952 after the original one in 1938.
But that's the old argument they use a lot. They just say it's a giant fish.
Right. In the loch.
Yeah, in the loch, yeah.
It doesn't match the eyewitness reports.
No.
The other example is the megamouth shark. So that was just caught by chance like 40 years ago. And otherwise we wouldn't have even known it existed. It's just like someone accidentally caught it. That weird thing on the screen there.
But the thing is, though, fish and sharks, people know it doesn't matter what species it is. For the most part, they're very similar to other sharks, other fish. People know the difference between that and a plesiosaur. That's
the problem, is that the descriptions and what's been caught on sonar and that underwater photography doesn't match any living creature. But he says both Loch Ness and Loch Morar are of the order of twice as deep as the North Sea. I didn't realize that's how deep the loch is. He said when they were part of the ocean for a time as the Ice Age was coming to an end, these will have been deep as well as large sea fjords, deep as large sea fjords in which the Nessies will have foraged and eventually become trapped. So that's his idea.
But even though it's deep, is it that large that you could have? Because it sounds like you'd need to have a surviving, a breeding population. And surely there's not enough food supply in a loch to sustain such a large creature.
Bauer says that's the best explanation. And he also adds that on several occasions over the years, Scandinavian Navy ships have reported sonar contact with apparent foreign submarines that subsequently always disappear before they can be identified.
Yes.
So he's saying, is that a Nessie-like creature as well? Because there are these sightings that are beyond the loch and into the oceans.
Well, I'm sure you'll get into it, but then that's where the supernatural aspect of this stuff comes in, and some of the wild, theories out there that they are teleporting dinosaurs, that there's some type of time rift at the bottom of the loch which allows them to come through.
Well, look, I'll link to Bauer's study and his book in the show notes at mysteriousuniverse.org, and props to him for attacking this young woman with her shitty Nessie book, beat us to the punch.
No!
Saying that, it's the greatest hoax of all time. Like, he was upset because she didn't even look at the evidence from, the 1970s and the stuff from the 1960s.
Did you just focus on the 30s?
Well, I don't know.
Look,
I've read
because
the book.
The thing is, the 1930s was this explosion of excitement about Loch Ness. And yeah, there was a heap of hoaxing going on. Like, you can't rule that, but that's part and parcel of this kind of stuff. Like, there are people that, because they think they're funny or because they're seeking fame or who knows what their motivation is, it's a human thing to do. They hoax this stuff. They sensationalize it. So, of course, there's a whole heap, but that doesn't rule out the possibility that something really is there.
Well, one of the reasons the 1930s was full of sightings is also because they were doing major roadworks around the loch.
Oh.
The trees had been removed so people could actually see the water that they couldn't see before. And there was a lot of blasting. Like, they were blasting large chunks of rock around that area and, clearing a huge amount of land to build the roads. And so the idea is it was disturbing something down there. So, more eyeballs on the lake and whatever was down there was being kind of woken up.
Well, once again, to further to that was the fact that, there were people that were kind of, I wouldn't say characters, but they were characters of the time that were hoaxing stuff and for attention. But there were people that were just run-of-the-mill, everyday people, respected members of their communities. And you got to remember, the communities back then were different to what they are now as well. They were smaller. You had a stronger reputation to protect. It's like these people would have experiences and they would report it and they would talk about it. They're not prone to making stuff up. You're not going to damage your reputation or cause trouble for yourself by going out and saying, oh, I saw one of these things and looking like the town lunatic.
Well, that's Bauer's argument with this is that it just became dogma that it's a hoax.
Right.
And it's irremovable. It doesn't matter what evidence is uncovered. That'll never be upturned. So that brings us to Ted Holiday. And of course, the Goblin universe I mentioned earlier. I love the cover of this book because it's like Nessie
sums it up perfectly.
Catherine Zeta-Jones going through the lasers in the museum. I love that. But this is one of the best books, but I'm not going to look at this today because we have covered it a bunch of times. We'll probably come back to some of the themes from it. But I wanted to reference, again, the Serpents of the Sky, Dragons of the Earth, which is a reissue of this one, The Dragon and the Disc. So this is where Holiday really started to understand that there was more to this than this undiscovered creature, this flesh and blood creature. And I'm going to skip straight ahead to chapter 3, which is the Paist of Connemara.
The Paist.
Paist.
That's a new word I've never heard before.
It's spelt P-E-I-S-T-E, but it's pronounced Paist. And Connemara is like this region of Ireland to the southwest. So during the 1960s, when Holiday and everyone else were totally focused on Loch Ness, this Captain Lionel Leslie, he was a member of the Royal Geographic Society, he was investigating the Irish variant. So he was over there speaking to locals.
Is that Morgwar or something?
Yeah, that's one of the names, but there's various ones. But he found if he went and spoke to the old-timers in Ireland where all these lochs are.
In the old country.
Well, he would ask them if they'd ever seen anything strange in the water. You know, the fishermen and the fishers and the people out on the lake all the time. And they'll just go, nah, never seen anything strange.
And well, you'd think that they're the people that, if there is something there, they would see it.
Well, he would keep the conversation going and then he would ask, oh, what about water horses? Have you ever seen water horses? And they're like, oh, yeah, we see water horses all the time.
But wait,
Why didn't you mention them?
But isn't a water horse a folkloric creature?
Yeah, like a water horse is basically a sea monster.
Yeah.
So once he mentioned water horses, all the locals, especially the old timers, were like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, I've got some stories."
Oh, so when you're asking a group of people, have you seen anything strange? To them, that's not strange.
That's totally normal.
Right.
Because so many people in that region had either seen something themselves, or they had a family member who had, or they had heard of someone who had. So the creature seemed to go under various names. Some people called it the Paist. Others spoke of the Horse-Eel or the eel horse. Old books called it the Paist Amore, but no zoological definitions were offered. So the largest loch in Connemara is Loch Mask, and he points out that mask is the Swedish word for worm.
Okay.
And so the origins of the word worm are serpent. And so again, it's like, okay, you've got even this body of water is named after a sea serpent. A recent witness of the Mask Monster was a Mr. A.R. Lawrence of Tullamore. And this is what he told to this Captain Leslie. So this was the 16th of June, 1963, like 9 a.m, calm, sunny day. And he saw this from the shore at a range of 250 yards. He said, "I suddenly saw what appeared to be the head and tail of a large fish close to the rocks. A second or so later, the movement was repeated in about the same place, but then there occurred another head and tail rise ahead of the first two, followed by the same movement some yards further northeast." So he saw multiple things. He said, I then realized I was watching two humps. And I get the irony that the first article I covered was saying that people don't see humps. He said, one behind the other, moving forward slowly and regularly across the mouth of the bay. It seemed to me like the back of a very large eel-like fish. He said, I never saw the head or tail, but I would guess the humps were about 5 or 6 feet in length and the distance between them about 8 or 10 feet. So that's a huge creature.
Yeah.
That is absolutely massive.
But this is coming back to, because, even though it's a smaller percentage, there is a number of people that witness a more serpentine style entity, like not with a thick body like a plesiosaur would have. Like it's more, and that's why I referenced the worm at the start, because that's what they used to call it.
Well, this again plays into the high strangeness, because we're going to hear reports that vary in certain ways. So word got to Ted Holliday about these eyewitness accounts. He said on the 4th of March, 1968, I got a letter from the rector of Clifton, Mr. E.C. Alston. And this guy wrote in the letter, a creature has turned up in the small loch near Clatterguff. It was seen by the man who lives near the loch and also by his wife and children. It went after his dog and would have killed it if it had gone into the water. He said it was 12 feet long. The man said, I went and heard his account, but I can't make it out. I don't see how it can live there. There's only a few trout in that lake.
Yeah, so we're back to what's supplying them.
How is it alive in there?
How's it sustaining itself?
So a colleague of Ted Holliday, David James, who was in the Parliament at the time.
Actually, sorry to interrupt. Is there a possibility they could be vegetarian?
And eat what?
Or there must
Algae?
be some, algae, some type of aquatic weed. But you think about gorillas, what do they eat? They don't eat meat very often.
Yeah, but they have to eat all the time. I don't know what plant matter would be around to sustain them.
Well, I mean, certain
the gorillas live in the forest.
Yeah, then there's plenty. But maybe in the water, there's plenty of weeds. I don't know.
Can't be that much. Anyway, that's an idea. This David James, the parliamentarian, he flew over and wanted to interview this guy. He got back to Ted Holliday and said, look, I'm just back from Ireland. Yeah, there's a creature which appears to be Loch Ness in character and was observed by this family of 7 for the best part of an hour. So this was a different sighting, and actually came into about 5 to 10 yards from where they stood. He said, I also interviewed 4 other people who have similar experiences in other lochs in the area. So Ted Holliday's like, all right, time to give Loch Ness a bit of a break. Books his ticket to Ireland and off he goes. So I wanted to focus on this. There's a bunch he mentions where he interviews locals, and yeah, they're describing the same things as Loch Ness, like the long neck and, it's like a horse-like head. They often describe a horse-like head. But I wanted to describe this sighting. It's of Loch Nahuan. And I think this one's good because it illustrates the high strangeness nature of this. And what's weird is I couldn't find this on the map. I was looking all afternoon for this place.
So you're stalking Lochs now?
Yeah, I'm usually stalking old ladies' Facebook pages to find info. But I was looking at Google Maps this afternoon to try and find it. And it doesn't have a name. It's not named. This is how small it is, how inconsequential this tiny piece of water is. So let me zoom in here. So this here.
Oh, you did find it. Did you find the bog or something, did you?
This is well, I knew it was southeast of Barna Loch, which is here. And then here's the witness's home. This is their little farm. It's obviously changed now, but this is where they were. And this is the loch. Look how small it is. Like if that's the home.
Yeah, so it's like what, maybe 15, 20 houses long?
Yeah. And that's like pretty full of water.
But is it deep? Does it connect underneath to something else?
Well, Holiday turns up at this tiny place. He says it measured about 100 yards by 80 yards when he was there.
So it's minuscule.
And he says, I stared at it, fascinated. Was it possible we had reduced the search area down to this miniature expanse of water? Because that's the problem with Loch Ness. It's freaking huge. It's impossibly deep. You're never going to find anything in there. He said, I remember saying, if there's one in there, it's ours.
But according to that drawing, unless that's suggesting that it's a river, is that demonstrating that there's like some like access to somewhere else?
He said this at times did go to a river,
Okay.
But I think when he was out there, it was just like peat. It was just peat. Like there was no water going through. And you can see here on the modern image.
Oh, yes.
You can see like the curve of the landscape where
it's sealed off.
It may have led out to the river at some stage, but not anymore. And so, and again, his source for this map is an older source. So he's thinking, this is it. Like, it can't escape me now. And remember, at the time, Holiday's like going to these lochs and he's literally dragging nets through them. He's still in the mindset that we can catch this thing. Like, all it takes is a lucky catch. And like, you know, the giant squid, which was caught for the first time caught on camera for the first time in 2006, then we'll know. We'll have our specimen. He says, so it was a Sunday and Mr. Coyne, the witness, and his wife and their 5 children were at home. So
so there's the house on the map I can see. So is that a different? It looks like it's different. It looks like the Coyne house.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Much further up.
So if we go to, so that's it on the map, the Coyne house.
So it's about halfway between the two lochs.
It's gone now.
Yeah,
because if you look at it that's what it.
Oh, look at that! Is that the remains of it?
Yeah, it's still the stone shell of their
That's
home.
Pretty cool.
So they're actually a bit closer than the house I was showing you. So yes, Stephen Coyne, he's a farmer. He had a few cows, but he worked at the local marble quarry, so he wasn't like a farmer full time. But so it was 7 on the evening of the 22nd of February, 1968. He went down to the bog by the loch to bring up some dry peat because, you know, they use it for fuel and whatever. And he took with him his eldest son, a boy of 8, and the family dog. And the sun had started to set, but it was still quite light. And he said once he reached the peat bed beside the loch, he noticed the black object in the water. Now, he thought it was his dog, so he starts whistling to it. But then his dog comes up from behind him, and he's like, what is this thing? The dog sees it as well and starts going ballistic, starts barking at it, going bananas. So he then sees that the object was an animal with a pole-like head and neck, about 9 inches to a foot in diameter. It was swimming around in various directions, and from time to time it put its head underwater, and when it did, 2 humps came into view. Occasionally a flat tail appeared. Once this came out near the head, which argued length and a high degree of flexibility. The thing was black, slick, and hairless, with a texture resembling an eel. The dog's barking seemed to irritate the creature, and it began to move inshore, its mouth open. However, when Coyne strode over to support his dog, it resumed swimming around in the little loch, so it wasn't completely scared off or anything. At this point, the boy ran home to get his mother to show her. She came out. It was still there. They all saw it. So both Mr. and Mrs. Coyne agreed that the creature was about 12 feet long. They saw no eyes. Listen to this. Mrs. Coyne told us that she noticed 2 horn-like projections on top of the head. Sound familiar? Both agreed that the mouth was underslung in relation to the snout. As dusk was settling, they finally went home. So it didn't disappear. It was just swimming there the whole time. They just had enough of it and went home. So after the interview, Ted, he's there with his fellow researcher, Ivor, and they go and visit some other lochs in the area because they're all over the place. But then they returned to Loch Ness to camp at night. And Ted said he tried to sleep in his car on the track, kind of next to the loch. And sleep was impossible, he said.
Why?
He had these neuralgic pains shooting from his teeth and along his jaw, like out of nowhere. He didn't have a rotten tooth or anything. He's like, what? Where is this coming from? He says that the pain was so bad, he ended up getting up and watching the loch under the moonlight, but it was under a deep shadow. There's still too much cloud, so he couldn't really see anything. So he's finally at 6:30 a.m. He's like, great, night with no sleep. He makes a scalding hot coffee and he takes a mug of it to his research pal, Ivor. I think he's in a tent or something. And he finds that he's sick as well. He's all of a sudden looking ill. His face is all flushed. He looks like he's got a chronic cold. And it's just like it came out of nowhere. And Ted Holiday is like, I don't know where these pains are coming from. This is really strange. Listen to what he wrote. He said there was something odd about these symptoms and the way they seemed to come and go over the next few days for no good reason. He said, at the time, I put it down to a damp environment. But months later, he said, when I was browsing through Sir E.A. Wallace's Budge's Babylonian Life and History, and I've got an image of this old book here. This is the cover. He said, I came across the following translated text. Now, this goes back to Sumerian, Babylonian myths. After Anu had created the heavens created the earth created the rivers created the canals created the marshes, and the marshes created the worm. Came the worm and wept before Shamesh, before Ea came her tears, and she said, now Ea is like Enki, the Sumerians knew him as Enki, the god of water, the bringer of knowledge. So this worm is before this water god saying, what wilt thou give me for my food? What wilt thou give me for my drink?
So it's like you make not a sacrifice, but an offering to this entity and you might get knowledge?
It's like this worm, this serpent of the land has been created.
Well, what is the serpent? The serpent, and not just in Babylonian history, it's also like the serpent is the bringer of knowledge.
Bringer of knowledge, bringer of life in some instances. They're connected with sight and wisdom. That is a broad question, too big to answer for this segment. But in the old story, the Babylonian story, this question, what wilt thou give me for my food? And Enki says, I will give thee dry bones and scented wood. And the worm's like, what? That kind of sucks. What are these dried bones to me? Let me drink amongst the teeth and set me on the gums, and I may devour the blood of the teeth, and of their gums destroy the strength. Then I shall hold the bolt of the door.
And he was having neuralgic pain in his mouth.
And here we have Ted Holiday investigating the worm in this impossible-sized loch. It's too small for anything. And he's getting these strange pains in his gums and his teeth, keeping him awake all night. His research partner is also getting ill. Isn't that a strange connection?
Mm.
And again, you look at the depictions of Enki in the Sumerian reliefs. See how he's covered in fish?
You haven't brought it up. Just bring it up.
He's covered in fish, the water god. And in other ones, you see he's got the two protuberances on his head as well. He's got the two horns. I don't know if that's connected. But he asked, was all this just another coincidence? All I can say is that this pain dogged me the whole time I was near Loch Ness. Not anywhere else in Ireland. Just whenever he went near this tiny little loch, he would get this weird mouth pain.
Did anyone else of the family describe any type of weird pains? Did they describe a sense of like a static electricity or electrical effects in the air? Were there any lights?
No, they were just scared. The kids were very scared of what they saw.
We'll go into it a little bit later on in the Plus extension, but this is something that Lethbridge touched upon, like these certain damp areas. They generated fields of some kind, which seemingly were connected with paranormal or supernatural activity.
Mm.
So it's like there's an interesting connection there that he's having these weird experiences, like well very I guess precise to him because it's like this later synchronicity that occurs. But it suggests to me that there is some other effect which is taking part here.
Mm. Yeah, some kind of environmental effect.
Yeah, which is potentially, though, because we call it supernatural, but the reality is it's natural. It's just a natural thing that we don't understand, and that's what's permitting this thing to be able to enter and exit our reality.
Well, it kept getting weirder because Ivor and Ted Holliday, they wanted to basically net the entire loch because it was small enough. They set up a boat.
An opportunity to do so.
And they had like normal fishing nets and metal nets, so were dragging through there to try and get something. And while they were doing this, that eyewitness, Stephen Coyne, he'd come down with his cows and check on them and see how they were going. And he admits to Holliday that he left out from his initial report to them that he had in fact seen one of these paste creatures 20 years earlier when he was with his brother. They thought a heifer had fallen into the loch until they saw it roll completely over and expose this pale belly and then kind of slither back into the water. He says it was as wide as a car.
At the same location or somewhere else?
He doesn't mention, but you'd presume it'd be the same location. It's like probably in the family, the place. So the children were terrified as well. Like Holliday said, when they were leading the cattle, they would never go near the loch. They would always take a very long, circuitous route around it.
Why are they fearful of it? Does it create like a sense? Like I know that yes, children can be fearful of things, obviously. But there's something else? Is it beyond?
Because they saw it.
But is it exuding something else? Is there like a sense that comes from it?
The father said they were scared of the tail because it just looked dangerous.
Right, okay.
It looked like it could knock them out.
Well, I'm just wondering only because as I was saying at the start of the show, so many of these reports of people encountering not just the Loch Ness Monster, but other cryptozoological creatures, there's something extra. There's like an energy to it. There's a connection with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this brings us round to the paradox of the whole thing because ultimately Holliday says it was extremely hard to accept that this tiny lake contained a 12-foot animal. The investigation was fast becoming paradoxical, he said. Although everything suggests that these pastes were indigenous to these lakes, there was nothing to indicate what they ate. Now, there were trout in the lake, but he said a creature of that size with the amount of fish that were in there, it would have drained it in a week. Then there'd be nothing left. So it just doesn't make sense. So they continue their search in this area of Ireland, and he said another witness emerged. In January of 1968, a Mr. W.J. Wood had been a fisherman on the lakes of Cork and Kerry for over 30 years, and he ended up seeing two sightings within a couple of years of each other. It was 1966 with the first one. He was fishing on the Loch Atterif, which is like a 16-acre lake. He says this long, dark brown object surfaced at a distance of about 100 yards, facing directly towards him. Here's the details. It had the head of a well-grown calf and large glittering eyes almost at water level. It appeared to be 10.5 feet long and protruded above the surface 5 to 6 inches. He watched it for 2 minutes, then it went straight down and submerged. The next year in 1967, he saw another one on a different lake, this 5-acre pool called Lake Lucca. He was fishing from a small mound. This was on the lakeshore. He wasn't on a boat. And saw this yellowish brown object, 7 feet long, surface directly in front of him. That second sighting convinced him, like, there's something in here. Like, how can I see 2 of these? There's absolutely something in here. He hasn't gone fishing since. He's too scared. Not far from the pool was a farm cottage where the elderly occupants stoutly denied the possibility of anything unusual. But then Holliday says they spoke to their son. And their son was like, oh, yeah, I've seen it. He had his own sighting, this guy. He was like a hefty local rugby football player, this young guy in his 20s. And he had seen something in the same lake that fisherman had seen something. He saw several feet of snake-like neck amongst the reeds. He said on the end of this head were 2 stumpy horns. He said it scared the life out of me and it slithered back into the water.
See, for me as well, that suggests that there is something going on here, that this isn't just a story which is getting out of control. That little subtle hint of like, yeah, there's horns on the head suggests to me that, and because you've got to remember, this is all well before the internet. Rumors can travel amongst towns, but it just adds for me this sense that it's like, I'm not going to talk about this, but this is what I saw. And then these validating stories, like other people describing the same thing.
Well, another eyewitness they end up speaking to is this sheep farmer. His name's Thomas Connolly. He's from Doon, And he talks about a sighting he had that year on the 8th of September. He said he was after his sheep on the mountain and he saw this object. He says it was bigger than a donkey foal or a mare's foal. It was black. They asked him if he saw any legs. He says, yes, it had 4 legs. So this is not an eel or anything like that. It's got 4 legs that it's walking on. It was on the land. They said, did it look like an eel? He said, yeah, it was, but it had legs. He saw it about 5 o'clock in the evening. He said the skin texture was just very, very black, so he couldn't really tell, what it consisted of. They asked him if it was crawling on its stomach or walking. He said it was just standing on its legs. He said the legs were like heavy stumps. Now, he said...
So it sounds more like a brontosaurus or something.
Isn't it bizarre? It's so strange. And then Holiday said, as we hurried out to, again, that little loch, Nahoin, I tried to assimilate this new testimony. Standing on the spot where Mr. Connolly claimed to have seen the beast, I suddenly remembered a paragraph from Devissa. The dragon was closely associated with water as a rain-bringer. It dwelt in dragon pools. When it awoke and was seen coiling and revolving, it was apparently regarded as a creative force. Now, Holiday says he recalled this passage because ever since they had come out to this little loch I've got on the screen here, the weather went bananas. He said the entire time they were in Ireland, which was like 6 weeks or something, they got like 4 days without rain.
That's just Ireland, isn't it?
Well, no. He said it was quite odd for the time of year and, it was just a little bit strange that the weather had turned so bad
but also,
after these sightings.
Isn't that unusual that, once again, there's no direct connection, obviously, but there is this strange parallel that it's like paranormal phenomena is taking place and clearly it's a creature that seems to be able to move, whether it's teleportation, reality shifting, who knows, but then there's strange weather activity. It's like missing 411.
It also brings to mind the Hopi rain dance.
Yes.
Which is done with serpents.
Or objects.
What do you mean objects?
So there's certain objects that are revered by certain cultures. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's serpentine objects which are used for summoning rain.
The serpent stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's this association with rain and the serpents. He then speaks to a Patrick King. This is a really interesting story. One of the neighbors had heard what they were looking for and said, wait here, I'll get, old Pat to speak to you. So Patrick King said, I don't remember it that well, but my father would talk about it all the time when I was a boy. He says it was jammed under the bridge at Ballynahinch Castle. So Ballynahinch Castle, I don't have an image of it, but it's, one of these, it's Europe. There's castles everywhere. And so he tells this story of how when his father was young, one of these creatures got stuck under this bridge near the castle. He said they couldn't kill him, so they were making a spear. The blacksmith was making a point on the spear so they could tie a rope to a tree and trap it. And they ask, what was the name of the blacksmith? And he gives them the name. He worked at the castle at the time. And then they ask, well, what was happening? And basically the story this guy remembers is that this Wyrm, this creature, got stuck under the bridge because there wasn't enough water. It was a particular dry spell and the locals just saw this thing trapped there. There wasn't enough water for it to submerge and keep going. He said he was caught under the bridge. They made a spear for him. But when they had completed the spear, they went out to spear the thing and this flood came out of nowhere. This is what his dad told him. This huge flood came, filled the river, and the Wyrm got washed away. How big was he, did your father say? He says about 30 feet. It was as thick as a horse. What did he say the head looked like? And he says, I didn't hear about the head. I only heard them talk about the size of him, and that would be about 80 years ago now. So obviously the guy's memory of his father's story is, pretty slim because it's so long ago. He says, do you remember anyone else having seen one of these things? And the guy's like, yeah, all the old timers know about these. They call them the water horses. So I tracked down an image of the bridge, and here it is on the screen here. So you got to imagine this without any water, just, a really dry season. Imagine walking along and seeing like a giant 20-foot worm with a horse's head and tiny little legs trapped under that bridge. That's what they claim was there.
It also just suggested that they're using the waterways to traverse.
But it's interesting, though, we jumped to that materialist conclusion that this was actually a physical creature that was physically stuck there. And yes, something must have manifested for them to see it. But then we have this story of it being washed away by this flood.
You're like it somehow summoned the water.
Yeah, it's like the creature is more associated with the river. Like the river is the creature rather than this thing just got stuck there.
So you're almost saying in a way that the creature is like a spiritual manifestation or a personification of the river?
Well, this is the Eastern idea, is that the dragons are the nature spirits of the particular element. So if you've got the dragon of the lake or the dragon of the river, it's the guardian protector in another realm of that physical part of the landscape. And so you have this river that is, the river's dried up, the river's sick, the river's kind of not well. And it manifests as all of a sudden they see this spirit, this giant worm spirit, in a state that is very much like the river. It is stuck. It is not moving. It can't flow where it needs to flow.
But you have to then question, why at that moment would it manifest in that fashion? And then why is it that all of a sudden be a flood that would come through to wipe it out after the humans had it? It's almost like it needed the attention of the humans for their energy or for, I don't know what it is. But remember, we talk about paranormal phenomena and how it needs a viewer. Like it requires us to observe it. It's like by it being observed and them interacting with it, that was enough to allow it to bring the water through.
Well, he said it was stuck there for 2 days.
Right.
And, it took the blacksmith a while to get this tip of the spear ready, and they had this plan. So they're all focused on, we're going to take care of this thing. We've got to get it.
But look what they were doing. They were focusing all their intent and their thoughts and their energy into it. I don't know. Maybe I'm, drawing too long a bow, but I have to wonder.
But what's also interesting is there wasn't a motivation to capture it, to go, here, world, look what we found. They just wanted to get it out of there. And it was annoying that it was there. There's no motivation to prove the existence of it and nothing like that. It's like, okay, there's this thing there. We just need to get rid of it because it was so accepted.
About to say, there's a practicality there because it's just like, oh yeah, this is one of these things.
Now, is it the same? Yeah. So the same eyewitness, he was working at the convent in Clifton. He said this was about 15 years ago. And he said at the time they had a donkey, a mare, he said, and he was looking for it. The donkey went missing. And so he goes looking for it, and it was over at the loch. This was Shannakiva. And he says, as you turn into the lake, the river widens. And he said, I saw this lovely black foal circling the donkey.
That ain't no donkey.
And they're like, what do you mean, going around her? And he says, yeah, so it wasn't actually in the water. It was like right on the edge of the water. And he says, yeah, this lovely black foal. And he says, I was going to go down there and bring it back to the road for shelter. And he says, as I went over towards the donkey, the foal disappeared. He says that was the last I saw of the black foal. And a couple of days later, the donkey dropped her real foal. So they're like, okay, hang on a second. So you get the picture that this is a guy, like some old Irish guy, doesn't really give much detail when he tells stories. So they're trying to coax exactly what happened out of him. And they ask him, like, what was this thing? And he's like, it's black. It was black. Anything else? Could you see legs on it? He says, oh yeah, there was 4 small little stumpy legs on it as it was circling around. How was it moving? And they said it was walking around the donkey. The donkey was just standing there circling around. Again, they ask more questions. He eventually reveals that the donkey was standing dead still, like it was petrified.
Because it knew.
And this thing is just circling it.
Was it preparing to attack it? Is that the impression that comes across?
I don't know. It's very strange. Well, the donkey was obviously pregnant. So maybe it was curious, something about that. But the fact that he thought it was a foal, again, speaks to the term of the water eel or the water horse being the typical description.
But its size is smaller than I would have expected in comparison to what other people are reporting.
He says it was as big as a foal, but it was long and maybe a bit too high. He says it was jet black, but he does just said he says there was mist everywhere, so it's kind of hard to make out.
Any horns?
Yeah, could you see any head on it? They ask, and he says, yes, there was a head. It's like, this guy's the worst eyewitness ever. He says there were ears too. It was circling around her. And then they ask him, did you ever see anything similar on the lakes? And he's like, oh yeah, long ago there used to be tons of these people. The old people would always talk about them. People see them all the time. We call them the Horse-Eels.
So I wonder what's happened that apparently, the old folk would be talking about this, as he says, there all the time. What happened? Why is it that all of a sudden it's like it's now become this obscure, strange thing to encounter?
That's a really good question. That is a really good question. I think that gets to the heart of it because the non-physical spirit behind things is not observed anymore by people.
Well, I think people stopped believing.
This is one of the arguments for the ancestors understanding the fuller richness of nature, because not only did they understand these things existed, it sounds like they could actually perceive them more readily.
Right.
And it's not that long ago that we lost this ability. I mean, the people that he's talking to, these are the old timers from the 19th century and earlier.
Well, the Industrial Revolution has a lot to blame with this, because it's around these times, like these generations, like it changed, like previous to that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we bring in industrialization, and it's this ultimate wonder, and it kind of sparked innovation and the progression of humanity. It stripped us of our spiritualism.
It's a really good question because it gets to the essence of this, and I think that's part of it, is that we've lost that perception of the spiritual nature behind the material world to the point where we literally don't perceive it anymore as our ancestors did.
And not do we perceive it, we refuse to even postulate that these things could exist.
So there's a ton of stories like this he mentions where, and from other sources as well, where people have thought it was like a foal or some kind of horse that they were, stories where it's like dark at night and they're like, what's my horse doing out there? And they go up to it. There's one story of a guy who's going out and looking for his mare, and he sees like another smaller horse, which he thinks is a foal. And he goes up to it and it's like, rah! It starts screaming at him, like this ungodly scream. All the other horses there freak out. He realizes it's not a horse as it goes back into the loch. Like, there's a bunch of stories like that. He said a day or two later, we were having tea with Reverend Alston and his wife at Clifton Lodge. And he's telling this reverend about, the lore of the water horses. And the reverend's like, yep, I've heard these stories. This is the local lore. It's not really a strange thing around here. But he says it's rather interesting you bring that up. And the reverend grabs Holiday and leads him to his study. And he says over the years, this guy had collected pieces of medieval sculpture, and he brings to light one of these pieces and shows Holiday. It's this sculpture, and he shows the carvings on the back of this old sideboard. And Holiday said, what I saw was a horse, and the rear part of it was its body tapered to an eel-like thinness, curled into tight coils. It was the dragon of folklore, the creature that Tom Connolly and Pat Canning and the other witnesses had seen in the bog with their own eyes. And so, it's really intriguing that even again, this goes back to the meme, right?
Yeah.
Of the medieval depictions of the dragons.
Yeah. Because they were actually perceiving it in some sense.
They weren't delusional. They were describing what they perceived. It wasn't some kind of, fantasy construction.
But look at this period, like time period, from Middle Ages then into the 1850s, the Industrial Revolution. It's right there. And it's like it almost changed humanity's perception.
I think you're actually hitting to the crux of the issue.
Like it took us away from our spiritual aspects. It took us away from our folkloric and, otherworldly view. Because it became so material. And what's happened now is like, I know now it's kind of come back to, well, science is telling us that the dinosaurs did have feathers. But the reality is anything that's like this kind of stuff, that is paranormal, it's like, it's got to be debunked. It's dangerous. It's actually dangerous. Like the fact that other book had misinformation in it, it's just like, it's perceived this way. It's actually like the paranormal in itself is perceived as a form of misinformation against the holy grail of science.
That's why the Soy Jack face is so good, because now he's mad.
Yeah. But they'll find a way to debunk it and to, dismiss it. And even in some ways, harness it and make out that, oh, no, people were just so foolish, but, we've got it worked out now. Like, again, there's arrogance attached to it. But really what it comes down to is that there is another aspect of the world that we simply cannot perceive because of our constructs.
Well, again, that meme was about dragons, and it led me to this book from Roland Watson called Dragons West of Loch Ness.
Tales of dragons roaming the hills and forests near Scotland's infamous loch.
I won't go into it because, you know the medieval dragon stories. It's like
they're awesome. They're really cool.
The saint struck it down and it breathed fire and burned the forests for all time. Like, very much like that. But what Watson has done is he's plotted. It's really quite good because he's used the modern sources of book scanning. So he says now it's a lot easier to search for references in all these old copies of books, and you can eventually find the sources of things. So he's using multiple references of these stories around Loch Ness of knights and saints
fighting dragons
that literally fought dragons on the land. But what he discovers is they're very close to Loch Ness. So the question he kind of puts forward is, were they fighting like the same species of creature from the loch? Were they making it onto land? Especially, it's interesting when you consider a lot of the sightings I just mentioned from Ireland, they've literally got feet. They've got legs.
Stumpy little legs.
They can obviously go on land. So I didn't spend too much time with that. I'll link to that in the show notes. And of course, I had to mention Nick Redfern's Nessie, exploring the supernatural origins of the Loch Ness Monster. So Redfern, as he normally does, really cuts to the juicy paranormal details. And he tells the story of, the demise of Ted Holiday. And I'll just quickly summarize this because I'm running out of time. But it starts in June of 1969. Remember, a bunch of students near the loch. It was actually near Boleskine House, which was previously owned by
Crowley had unleashed God knows what.
Yeah, Aleister Crowley. They found this ancient piece of tapestry, and it was wrapped around a sea snail shell. These students just came across it. It was just there on the ground. It was about 4 feet by 5 feet in size. And this old piece of tapestry was adorned with all this serpent-like imagery. It had worms on it and ancient snakes, and had the Turkish word for serpent translated all over it.
Also, when they unwrapped it on the wind, you could just hear, yeah.
Well, Holiday was able to examine that, and he noticed, quite quickly that the tapestry was in perfect condition.
Which it shouldn't have been.
It wasn't moldy, it wasn't ripped, it wasn't shredded in any way. So that suggested it had obviously been left there in the last couple of days. Which this started to introduce a kind of new paranoia for Holiday, because he started to suspect that this tapestry, along with the links to Boleskine House to Crowley, were indicative, Redfern says, of a highly secret, powerful, and maybe even deadly dragon cult that was operating in the Loch Ness area. He claimed that there was a potential that they were doing sacrifices, they were trying to summon...
Probably finish off what Crowley was attempting to do in that episode Abramalian Meltdown that I covered. He did that ritual attempting to open up a portal, an interdimensional rift, if you will, to bring in these entities and creatures. He didn't complete it properly, but I think he left the door half open. So I wouldn't be surprised if another group had come along in occult circles that knew about what Crowley had done and had gone, hey, here's a good location that we can try and open something up.
Yeah, Holiday became convinced they were trying to summon some ancient Babylonian creature connected to Draco or something like that. It's a pretty wild story, but there were other details that made you think, is something actually going on down there? Because he was invited to a dinner party with an American friend of a colleague. And at this particular dinner party was this guy named Dr. M.D. And
Dr. M.D.?
Yeah, so, no, I get, not D as in D-double-E.
Right.
And so immediately you think of, John Dee.
Yeah.
The famous occultist. And,
astrologer.
And of course, Crowley tried to kind of reimagine or, I guess, resurrect John Dee's Enochian occult magic. And so this person, Dr. M.D., at the end of this dinner party, Holiday said the atmosphere turned quite dark and menacing. And this guy kind of leaned in and very quietly told him, I've researched my ancestry and I know I have a famous relative of mine that you might know. Now, it was strange because Holiday said the whole manner of saying this was in a threatening manner. It was very strange and dark. He said it in a menacing way. And obviously he was pointing to John Dee. And Holiday came out of that dinner party feeling like it was a threat. And it was sort of a warning to stay away from researching this. Unless he's just getting super paranoid.
I mean, he could have been, but...
And so a few days after this, I think this was maybe the next year, 1971, you might remember Ted Holliday's on the loch. He's scouring the loch, which he often did. He's looking out on the water. And he suddenly noticed the letters E, then DEE, appear on the surface of the water in this strange yellow foam. He was convinced it wasn't pareidolia. It was actually some kind of weird
as a warning
message. And so, again, he's plunged into this deepening paranoia, Redfern points out. It starts to get stranger after this because this is where the whole side of the flying saucers enters the equation, because all these sightings started to appear around the area in Loch Ness. There was a local Swedish woman who claimed she saw a craft shaped like an iron, like a clothes iron,
yes,
descend into the forest while she was out walking. And she claimed she was approached by 3 strange humanoids wearing what looked like diving suits. Typical like entity encounter. She later told Holiday that when she returned to Sweden, she was intimidated by a man in black. Holiday wanted to go out to this area of the forest to investigate, but the woman begged him not to. I think he did end up going out there, but she begged him not to, saying that like the whole area is full of evil. Don't go there. He also came across this Donald Amand. He was a doctor and he was a reverend. Amand had a Norwegian friend who had his own sightings of these sea monsters. He had a couple of sightings. I'm not sure if it was in the loch or somewhere else, but this guy convinced the reverend that they were actually evil. And he said something that intrigued Amand, which Holiday agreed with. He said that these creatures, they can't harm you physically. Well, they can harm you, but not physically.
Like
and
psychosomatically.
They are absolutely malevolent. Now, the Reverend asked him what he meant by this, and this Norwegian guy said, well, they try and drive you mad. They provoke anxiety, they provoke paranoia, and finally, their goal is mental collapse. That's their purpose. And so this Reverend was convinced that they had to do something about it, and that's what led to the exorcism of the lake, the famous exorcism, which we've mentioned on the show many times before. Holiday joined them on the lake, and so did like a BBC photographer, and this Reverend does this like typical exorcism. Holiday said the photographer was just like, his face was white, mouth agape, this strange, like ominous feeling descended on the lake. He says like the Oz effect kicked in and was all silent. And it was just absolutely bizarre, this weird tension. The next morning, Holiday's walking down on the loch, and he sees this man about 90 feet away, and it's like a typical Men in Black encounter. We know the story. He's dressed head to toe in black, and this figure is focused intensely on Ted Holiday. He's not looking out at the water, as most visitors do. He's staring at Ted. He said, I felt a strong sense of malevolence, this cold, passionless stare. The man appeared to be dressed in what Holiday described as black plastic. His hands were gloved, black too, and his head was covered by something that looked like a motorcycle helmet. No surprise on its color, it was black. Goggles covered his eyes. Even his nose and mouth were covered. Holiday walked towards the man, and the MIB neither moved nor acknowledged his presence. Holiday got to within 10 feet, and the man vanished. Dematerialized. Not into the water, just vanished. So Holiday tried to deal with this bizarre hallucination, thinking, okay, maybe I'm too far into the deep end, take a break. But a year later, he was in the exact same spot where he saw the MIB, and as you know,
he had a heart attack.
He had a heart attack and died, and that was the end of Ted Holiday. So that description of the man in black, like we can jump to the conclusion, this is associated with the UFO sightings that were in the area. But
I don't think so.
it also made me think of the eyewitness accounts who describe the skin of the Loch Ness Monster as black, like oily black, like almost like plastic, like an eel black. And so,
because his description of that man in black is a little bit inconsistent with the other reports. Like the other reports, they're wearing just cloth suits. Like there's not this oily blackness to them.
that don't fit them
plastic.
very well.
Yeah.
They're not wearing plastic. This is,
and not helmets or goggles. Like they wear sunglasses sometimes.
This hints to some kind of shape-shifting, obviously something of an occult nature.
Well,
and very sinister as well.
It is very sinister. And this is connected. It's funny because, we've been bashing like the whole it's generated by the mind. I don't think it's generated by the mind, but what I do think is happening with these, it's like, I was going to say entities, but it's like, it's a force, not even entities. It's like a natural force, which we perceive as supernatural. But what it does is it taps into our minds and manifests in certain ways. So for so many years before, like the industrialization, it would manifest as a water horse, like as a creature, like you as a human being would expect to see. It's a little bit off, but it's still like it's a creature. But now, because of everything going on and the rituals, and it's like it's now morphed. It's tapped into Holiday's mind and manifested as this man in black figure.
Yeah, it's a good point. Because if we are talking about something that is the spiritual, non-physical representation, like the guardian of the Loch, for example, that puts it in the same framework as these other protective spirits, nature spirits. Their forms aren't bound. Their forms can shift and change. How we perceive them has similarities, but obviously they can shift.
And on top of that, though, then there's other connotations of like, well, did it really have anything at all to do what he was digging into? Did it have anything to do with? Was it just simply for the fact that he showed up at the Loch Ness? Loch Ness has special characteristics to it that permit these things to be seen. But this was like a forewarning of his coming heart attack, because what is black? Black is associated with death, and death, is personified as this man, normally a skeleton type creature in more, creepier sense. But it's like a forewarning of what was going to happen to him in that spot. And what happened? The guy just simply disappeared. He dematerialized.
Yeah, it's like the Grim Reaper.
Well, in a way, so did Holiday. Like a year later, just simply, essentially, he died. But what did he do? He dematerialized from this reality. So I don't know. Maybe I'm going too deep, Ben. As deep as Loch Ness.
It just sounds like Middle Ages bullshit to me.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
I'll link to everything I've covered in the show notes. If you're ever in the region, very nice, dirty bog peat out there in Ireland, you can go check out.
We really have to head out that way sometime.
No, we don't.
We do.
Can you imagine going out there? There'd be nothing out there.
We do. We have to go and we'll hook up with Jonathan Downs and we'll go and check these locations.
Is there a street view nearby? Can I get? Oh, yeah.
There you go.
And go here. Let's have a look. It's beautiful.
It's spectacular.
It's beautiful out there.
Yeah. But isn't it intriguing as well that it's a seemingly reasonably remote. I mean, there's obviously other people down further there, but like a remote location, it would have been even more remote when Holiday was heading out there. And that's where these things kind of manifest. It's like, do they want to remain hidden?
Good question. I'll link to everything in the show notes, mysteriousuniverse.org. Check it out today and sign up for our Plus membership, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. You get access to the big extensions we do on every show. So this isn't the end of the show. Huge section coming up from Aaron. Remind us what's coming up.
The whispers of the stones, the psychometry of stone and how it speaks to people. We're going to look into some of Lethbridge's work and some of his experiences. Then we're going to talk about transformative experiences that allow people to perceive behind the veil and look into future timelines.
Good stuff coming up. Again, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. Sign up today. Help support your favorite show. And of course, if you sign up for the Emmy Max tier, you get access to our massive back catalogue going back 17, 18 years now. Again, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. That's a wrap, though, for this free edition of the show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.